Welcome to the silent verdict.
With Clara Monroe and Elias Gray. Ever wonder when, private bedroom scenarios just detonate, explode into these very public, career-threatening accusations?
It's pretty stark, isn't it? A real reminder of how our personal and professional lives can get tangled up, especially when you're under that kind of intense public spotlight.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving straight into this situation around Shannon Sharpe, former NFL star, big media personality now, and these allegations from Gabrielle Singa.
Right.
Our focus today, really, is trying to get a handle on the core of this thing, looking through the lens of those publicly discussed texts and that recorded phone call, especially how a criminal lawyer analyzed them.
Yeah, and that legal perspective gives us a useful framework, for understanding the potential interpretations, the legal angles that are now part of this whole public story.
Exactly.
And importantly, we're not speculating or picking sides.
No, definitely not. Just trying to give you a clear picture of how it's being presented out there. And what makes it so compelling, I think, is this clash of really complex stuff, consent, obviously, power dynamics, especially with that big age gap. What is it, like 3 decades?
Yeah, roughly 30 years. That's significant.
And then you've got the murky territory of sexual role play, BDSM, and just the potentially massive fallout from public accusations for someone like Sharpe.
And that age and power dynamic, it's something you really have to keep in mind.
Yeah.
It definitely colors how you might perceive the interactions, the consent, all the nuances.
So let's get right to the core legal questions that have come up in this commentary we're looking at. The main thing seems to be this really sharp contrast between what might look like consensual BDSM role play on one hand, and then these allegations of acts that were not consensual, specifically choking and other sexual contact.
And legally, that distinction is everything. Consensual activity, fine. But the second consent isn't there, or it's withdrawn. That the whole legal picture changes dramatically.
It's about the boundaries, right? What was agreed to, and were those boundaries allegedly crossed?
Precise.
And the analysis we're drawing from asks, an interesting question. Why weren't these allegations taken straight to the police as potential crimes? The commentary mentions the different legal standards probable cause for charges versus preponderance of evidence for civil suits. What does that really tell us?
Well, it points to a basic difference in the system. Criminal charges need that higher bar, a reasonable belief a crime happened. Civil suits are more likely than not.
Okay.
So the fact there wasn't an immediate criminal complaint could mean a lot of things. Maybe about the evidence, maybe about her initial choices,
Which kind of leads right into the next point. The potential for criminal charges for these alleged non-consensual sexual acts. The commentary explicitly brings this up.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
If the allegations hold up and meet the definition of sexual assault where this happened, charges could definitely be filed. It would depend heavily on the specifics of what's alleged.
Now, shifting just a bit, there's also talk about the potential defense of consent, especially in that BDSM role-play context. That gets complicated when you put it next to the basic idea that no means no. How does the law handle that?
Yeah, that's tricky legal ground. The law tries to account for the nuances of BDSM. So prior consent to certain activities within a role play, that can be a factor.
Right.
But, and this is critical, the main legal principle holds. Consent can be pulled back anytime. Any act after consent is withdrawn is non-consensual. Full stop. No always means stop, no matter what was agreed to before.
Then there's the civil lawsuit angle looming. The commentary mentions some pretty big numbers, a reported $10 million settlement offer, maybe even a $50 million demand. What's the deal with those figures?
Well, numbers like that just underline the huge financial stakes, don't they? Especially when you're dealing with someone with a high-profile, deep pockets. A successful civil suit could mean a massive payout if damages are proven.
And interestingly, the commentary also touches on defamation claims, like things said publicly or even in legal papers could lead to more lawsuits.
Absolutely. Defamation, making false statements that wreck someone's reputation, that's another legal avenue either side could potentially take if they feel they've been wrongly and publicly damaged. It can cut both ways.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think. In some places, non-consensual sexual acts can have incredibly severe penalties, like potentially life without parole.
Very serious consequences.
But then they also raise a sort of concerning point about what that could incentivize.
Yeah, it's a complex point. On one hand, severe penalties show how seriously we take these offenses. But the commentary rightly notes there could be unintended consequences, maybe even perverse incentives when the stakes are that high. It's a difficult balance.
And one last legal point here. The fact that there was apparently an attempt to settle this out of court for a lot of money, as the commentary suggests, that kind of signals something, doesn't it?
Settlement talks often do, yeah. It frequently suggests that at least one side sees a potential legal weak spot, or maybe just wants to avoid the risk, the cost, and the publicity of a full trial. It's risk management, in a way.
Okay, right. So let's shift focus now to the main arguments as laid out in the commentary we've been looking at. We get some idea of Singinga's perspective from those texts and the phone call that were made public. Some messages, as reported, clearly show her wanting BDSM stuff. Specific phrases even, like, I want to be abused, daddy, put a dog collar around my neck and choke me.
Right. Those messages are out there.
But then things take a really sharp turn. What happens there?
Exactly. Because right alongside those messages suggesting she wanted certain BDSM acts, you have other statements that paint a totally different scene. And it's in that clash, that contradiction, where the core conflict really lies.
Yeah. Other messages, statements from that phone call, especially the one, quote, I cried when you left. I beg you to put a condom on and not put it in my ass and you didn't listen. I don't care what our history is, no means no. That's a starkly different account.
It is.
And she also reportedly said she felt manipulated and specifically said, I don't want to be choked, but you did choke me.
Yeah, a powerful contradictory image.
And it really highlights that crucial difference between expressing interest in certain types of activities, maybe exploring fantasies, versus the absolute right to say no at any specific moment.
Right.
That reported direct refusal, no means no, just hammers home how vital it is to respect boundaries no matter what came before.
Okay, now let's try to look at Sharpe's perspective. It's more inferred, really, from the situation and things allegedly said. His defense would likely center on consensual role play.
That seems the logical angle, yeah. But then there's that alleged response from him about the choking that the commentary highlights. What's the significance of that specific alleged comment? Well, I choke you in public then, apparently in response to her saying she didn't want to go out because she didn't want to be choked.
Yeah, if that statement is accurate, it's incredibly damaging. It suggests, well, a potential dismissal of her clearly stated boundary. And it brings in this coercive feel that really undercuts a simple, it was all consensual role play argument. Plus, saying it about doing something in public adds this whole other layer of intimidation, maybe. It sounds quite sinister, frankly.
It brings us back to that lawyer's analysis in the commentary. One of their key questions was, why wasn't this initially treated as a possible crime?
Right.
Their analysis goes into the messiness of consent in BDSM, the dangers when things escalate sexually, but also brings up the possibility of other motives behind the allegations, like financial gain. It's not simple.
No, it's definitely not. The lawyer's view really underlines how tricky it is to interpret consent, especially when you factor in things like power imbalances, that age gap again.
Yeah.
And it just highlights the difficult calculations involved when these intensely private details suddenly burst into the open and get thrown into the legal meat grinder.
Well, let's pivot a bit to the turning points. Things that really shifted the situation, according to the commentary. The public release of those texts and that phone recording, that feels like a huge one. How did that change the game?
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
The second private messages go public, the whole dynamic flips. It stops being just a personal dispute and becomes this thing everyone's scrutinizing. It can sway public opinion, influence legal strategy, wreck reputations.
Yeah, totally changes the landscape. Then there's that reported attempt to settle for big money, that $10 million figure again. That feels like another key moment, maybe suggesting a wish to contain the damage.
A settlement offer like that often signals a point where someone calculates the potential cost financially, reputationally of letting it play out publicly versus trying to make it go away quietly. It's a strategic move, usually driven by perceived risk.
And it sounds like it even grabbed the attention of other big names. The commentary mentions another celebrity allegedly trying to get info. That just pours fuel on the public fire, doesn't it?
It really does. When other famous people get involved, even just by showing interest, it amplifies the story. It shows how much buzz it's generating and potentially broadens its reach even further.
But maybe the biggest turning point, certainly for Sharpe professionally, is the hit to his career. The commentary mentions a major media deal now potentially up in smoke because of all this. What does that tell us?
It's a stark illustration of the immediate, real-world professional damage allegations like these can cause, long before any court decides anything. Reputation is currency, especially in media, and damage there can cost millions.
So Based on the commentary we've reviewed, where do things actually stand right now? What's the current verdict or lack thereof?
Well, according to this analysis, there hasn't been any formal legal verdict. No criminal conviction, no civil judgment at this point. It's presented as very much ongoing.
Yeah.
So the potential for more legal action, more reputational fallout, it's all still very much on the table for everyone involved.
Right. Okay, so stepping back, what's the core message here for you, the listener? What's the main takeaway from digging into this really complex, kind of messy situation?
I think what jumps out is just how absolutely critical clear communication is. And not just clear, but explicit, enthusiastic consent, respecting boundaries. Always.
Yeah.
Especially when you get into areas like BDSM or specific role play, that need for ongoing dialogue, checking in, making sure consent is still there.
Yeah.
It's just paramount. You can't assume anything.
Absolutely. And this whole situation really puts a harsh spotlight on how vulnerable public figures are when private stuff leaks out. It just rips open the curtain.
It does.
And it makes you think about those power dynamics. Again, consent within relationships, especially with big age gaps. The lawyer's analysis really leaves us chewing on some tough questions, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, where exactly are those ethical lines, those legal lines, when someone says consensual role play crossed over into non-consensual acts?
Yeah.
That's fundamentally what's being debated here. And also, what does it mean for society when such intensely personal, sensitive details become, well, public consumption? How does that shape things?
This whole deep dive into the Shannon Sharpe situation, it really leaves you with a powerful reminder, I think, of just how fast private lives can turn into these huge public fights and the impact allegations have, regardless of where the truth ultimately lands.
And looking at the bigger picture, maybe the takeaway is about that constant need for active communication, talking openly about desires, boundaries, consent, understanding it's not a one-off yes, but a continuous process in any relationship.
So thinking about all that, the nuances of consent, power, how easily things can be misinterpreted, especially in intimate settings. What responsibility do people have to make sure things are crystal clear, that agreement is ongoing, enthusiastic, particularly when exploring maybe less conventional practices?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah. And how does watching all this play out publicly, consuming these details, how does that shape our own understanding of these really complex, really human issues?